One of the most common and reoccurring questions that I get on my channel has to do with string gauges, and they have to do with tuning and also tension. And there's a wide variety of questions that I get. It can start from what kind of string should I use for this tuning, 4-string, 5-string, it just goes through this entire deal, and I can't go back and answer each one of them individually. But if you go right, I'm going to say here, if you go right about there, you can check out a video on where I'll talk about a little bit of achieving tuning up and down, and you can actually, you'll be able to see that it'll generate questions right there. So I'm going to answer them in an FAQ manner. Now, there's two categories that you can really deal with this, and which is 4-string and 5-string. And what you can do with each one of these is determine whether or not you're going to stay in these gauges or not. First, I'm going to tell you what to do before and after you change your strings, and then at the end of this video, I will show you what type of strings to use for specific tunings, which is probably the majority of my questions. So starting with the 4-string bass, and I'm going to go get mine. Excuse me there. This is my 4-string bass, and I've got a regular gauge of strings on there. And usually these basses come with a regular gauge of 4-string basses, meaning you can tune to E, A, D, and G, so all 4 tunings are E, A, D, and G, without any problems, and you can probably get it set up for a really good tension. And what you can do from there is tune it to D, A, D, G, which is drop D, and D, G, C, F, which is D standard, and C, G, C, F. I can get to drop C without too much of a tension problem. So what do I do at that point? Well, I might want to tune to drop C on this instrument, but I want to keep the tension the same as E standard. What do? You get a thicker gauge of strings, and again, I'll tell you later what kind of gauge, but when you get a thicker gauge of strings, you slap on that new gauge of strings and you tune to drop C. And now you're at this new thicker gauge of strings, and now you can play what are clearer notes in drop C. But you might be getting fret buzz. Why? Well, you might want to get your bass set up for drop C. And the reason that you do this is because when you put a new set of strings on, thicker strings, it can do a lot to your truss rod because it's this new tension of strings. And what can end up happening in your journey of tuning below is you get a lot of intonation problems and fret buzz and things like that as a result of adding these new strings. So what do? Take it to your guitar shop, tell them that I got this new set of strings, and I want to tune it to drop C, set it up for drop C. And using that principle I showed you before, getting from standard to drop C, you can tune to drop C at the highest, and then you can tune to anything below up till the point where it starts to get loose again. Then you have to get a new set of strings, an even thicker gauge of strings, to tune even lower than that. People ask me, can you go any higher than your new setting of strings? You cannot, because what can end up happening is if you tune, let's say you tune this E and you tune it to F, you tune it higher, you're adding more tension on the truss rod and it can damage your bass. So I do not recommend that once you get a new set of strings which are thicker to tune any higher than your new setting of strings. I'm going to show you what to do on a 5-string now. This 5-string, again if you go to the video that I showed you earlier, is able to get me to the whole 4-string theory, all the tunings I told you before on these higher 4-strings, these 4 right here, and everything else that is from drop C down to A standard on these 4 strings. So I don't need to do much string changing on my 5-string. I can keep the regular gauge of 5 strings the 5 strings that I have, and I can go from standard to A standard, E standard to A standard, every tuning using the higher and lower 4 strings. And what's really cool about this is because I'm the kind of guy that tunes to all these different tunings all the time, and I'm not ever just in a regular set of tuning, I can use a 5-string to get me in those places. Now what's really cool about this is I can always be in B standard, which is a regular tuning for a 5-string, but then I can move up and down when I want to play different songs. I can tune to drop C for one song, then tune back to standard, then tune to all these different songs, and I can get as much as I want out of it tuning-wise, and I don't really have to change my strings all that much. So if you're going to be one of those people that tune to all these tunings because you want to play all these different songs, then get a 5-string bass, because you can't really do that on a 4-string unless you want to spend a lot of money on strings, on 4-string gauges. So that's what you have to do if you tune to a bunch of different tunings and you want to get to a better.
And now for
tune.
what kind of strings you're going to be using. Because there are a lot of different types of strings, when you figure out the gauge, or just using the same principle as the thicker the gauge, the lower the tuning, doesn't exactly help, because there's so many types of string tunings that you can get to and so many types of strings. So I'm going to go on the internet and I'm going to show you what I think each string from, and I'm going to start with Ernie Ball, what each string can do for you in terms of tuning. And when you get there, you're going to notice one thing. When I go to bass strings, there's nickel wound, coated bass, flat wound, stainless steel. You can look at all these different ones, but when you see different types of strings rather than nickel wound, each one of them are made for a specific type of sound, brightness wise, hollowness, the mellow tune, because a lot of jazz musicians, they like a brighter sound, maybe they like a mellow sound. You can be very keen on what you want the strings to sound like rather than what you want to tune them to, but this is going to be specifically for tuning purposes, so I'm going to just go on nickel wound, which is the basic set, and it'll bring you to this whole page, which there aren't very many strings. There's just a few basically to choose from. You actually memorize each one of these. So starting with the extra Slinky, this is specifically for E standard, and I'm talking about all these strings in my opinion, but this is specifically for E standard tuning without going anywhere but E standard. You can also tune up to F if you want, because these strings at E standard are also at a very low tension. These are specifically made for E standard and soloers, because if you play very high on the neck, then you'll be using strings like this that will be able to get you to a very nice vintage type of sound with a very light feel on your strings. It's a very light gauge of strings, and I do not recommend going anywhere but standard with these, if you even get these. The Super Slinky is just the same as the last, but you're able to, I think, get to drop D with these without any problem, because for drop D, all you have to do is tune down just the first string. And when you go to drop D on this set, it's the same as going to standard on this set, possibly at least the thickest gauge of string. So this is just the same as the last set that I showed you, the extra Slinky, but just just a higher tension, and you're able to get to drop D on this set as well, which is just fine. The hybrid Slinky is made specifically for drop D tuners and standard tuners that like to have a very thick punch on the top two, on the bottom two strings, however you look at it, the thicker two, and a more fluid feel on the higher two. Meaning if you play a lot of high notes and you want more of a fluid sound, you want more of a faster sound, you play maybe chords and things like that, you will be using the thinner higher gauge and the thicker lower gauge to your advantage, because what you can do is you can excuse me, you can use the thicker gauge for a punk rock sound, for just a very punchy, heavy hitting sound, and you can use the thinner gauge for more of a fluid feel. And I recommend that these strings go towards drop D tuning, of course standard tuning, but nothing below drop D. Because of these higher strings, when you tune anything below drop D, these higher strings will be even lighter on the gauge than the top two. So what you'll be able to do is get to D and G just fine, but C and F are not going to be that great. So drop D at the lowest on this set as well. Now, if you recall earlier in the video, probably the earliest in this video, I state that in my 4-string, I can go from standard to drop D to D standard to drop C without too much of a problem, at least to drop C without too much of a problem. This is the set that I'm using. This set will get you a pretty good tension on standard tuning. It'll get you a pretty good tension on drop D tuning. D standard will give you just enough to get by, and then drop C is where you'll be able to draw the line from, again, excuse me, from where you're going to be able to run on fret buzz and other variables like that. So this will be able to get you all the way down to drop C, I believe, without too many problems. If you're just going to be playing live and you need to go to drop C for a little while, this is fine. But if you're going to be recording, again, don't try this with drop C. This set will get you to drop C and will be able to keep the tension just enough for you to set it up and get a greatly intonated bass sound. It'll also go all the way up to standard, but the tension is going to be extremely high, or not extremely high, but it's going to be noticeably high. This is good for drop D, D standard, and drop C securely. You can also try to go to C standard and maybe even below that, but again, you'll start to get a little bit of wobble at right around B standard tuning. So the E's, D's, and C's are covered with this set of string. Now with this set, I don't really do much with this, but this set is really nice for, again, 4-string users that want to go to drop C at the highest, but want to be able to reach drop B maybe, it's just sometimes. And this set's very nice, you have to just use the bottom 4 strings and throw out the highest one. And if you're a 5-string user and you want to use these strings, this is just for a very nice type of feel for B standard. This is equivalent to this for a 4-string. On a 5-string set, when you tune to B, E, A, D, G, you can use this set of strings to get a very nice low tension to just be able to solo and things like that. This is what I use for my 5-string, and if you've noticed so far, I use the regular gauge for both my 4 and 5-string basses. With this, it's the same principle as the last one I showed you, meaning in my 5-string, I can get to standard using the higher 4 strings, I can get to drop D using the higher 4 strings, and I can get to B standard, C standard, B standard, drop C, A standard, and drop A. Those 5 tunings using the lower 4 strings, or even all 5 of them. This is a very good set because it's the most dynamic set that I can find for any 5-string. And I don't recommend that you put these on your 4-string, but if you want to get to drop D, or not drop D, but drop B, and you want to get to B standard, and you want to get to even drop A securely, this is the set for you. So anything below drop C, anything below C standard, so the B's and the A's are covered in this lower 4-string set here. Now for the next set, this is specifically for 5-string users. I don't recommend putting these on your 4-string bass unless you tune to drop A and A standard exclusively on your 4-string, then this is just fine for that. But on a 5-string, if you tune to drop C, you want to tune to drop C on your higher 4 strings and actually tune to the true tuning for a 5-string drop C and add the G on top of that lowest C, this is the set of strings to go for because you can tune to C, G, C, and F on your higher 4, and you can tune to G, and you'll be G, C, G, C, F, which is kind of cool. And this is also very good for any other tuning where you tune your higher 4 strings to any drop tuning, but you also want the theory note above that drop tuning with you. So this is a very good set for going even lower on your 5-string bass and getting even more dynamics out of it. But I recommend this specifically for 4-string users that want to tune to drop A or A standard, and also 5-string users that want to get more out of their 5-string bass, meaning going lower. Now, that's it for the gauges, but if you really want to get more specific, you could go back on the site, and you can go, actually you didn't have to go back, you could just go to products, bass strings, you can check all these other ones out. Let's go to coded. And these are just coded strings at different gauges, and they give you more of a brighter sound. They give you, it's just depending on what kind of sound you want, but I'm going to go on a site for a company called Diodario, or Diodario, however you say that. And I'm going to go on their bass string settings, or bass string products, and you'll see that these people also have a very wide variety of different sounding strings, not just gauges, but how they actually sound, what kind of strings they're made for, what kind of bass players they're made for. And if you go on there, or if you check out right here, they say bright and mellow, so they tell you how bright or mellow each string sound is. And then when you go within each one, and this is the equivalent to the last one that we went on, the nickel round wound, they have a huge variety of strings for a very, very good size of range that you can choose the gauge of and also the size of each string. So I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can actually check each one of these out. So you can also not just find what gauge you need, but you can also tell yourself, well, maybe I want medium mellow, or maybe I want a brighter set, maybe I want something that sounds like this kind of jazz music, and you can actually give yourself a specific sound of string that you want that you can add on your bass guitar, and you can get a more in-tuned custom sound with your instrument. So that is basically it when it comes to choosing your gauge for strings and possibly even going farther with the different sounds of your strings that you might want. If you guys have any more questions, if you need me to elaborate, if you need me to get down on anything, then please ask me any questions. I will answer them. Thank you.